Ever wanted to bounce around an HR issue with a knowledgeable lawyer? Well, now you can. Welcome to We Have This Employee, workplace scenarios from CIE Legal's HR lawyers, where Andrew Marr and Ines chat about their perspective on an HR hot topic.
Welcome back to We Have This Employee. In the first part of this episode, we talked about some of the obligations that an employer has with respect to a request for flexible work arrangements. If you missed part one, I suggest you go back and listen to that first, because this episode, or part of an episode, follows on directly from that discussion.
The last couple of points around what could be the operational reasons for refusal include also that the working arrangements would likely result in a significant loss in efficiency or productivity and likely to have a significant negative impact on customer service. So those are the two final.
Yeah, so the second last one that you mentioned, I mean, you could see yourself getting into all sorts of trouble there by making just a blanket assertion that that's the case, it ending up the Commission and all of a sudden having to provide empirical evidence in support.
And that's what the Commission wants.
And the Commission will want that. And that becomes quite difficult sometimes, because sometimes it is sort of anecdotal. You have a feeling, you've been in this, you say you're the owner of a business or one of the senior managers, or you're in HR and you've been in the business for a long time. You do have a sense of how things operate, but you're not always going to have the objectively sort of testable metrics to support what you kind of already know observationally from having been involved in the organisation for a long time. So when you do say, oh, well, it's going to impact on efficiencies and what have you, you really need to be able to put your money where your mouth is in terms of those sort of assertions if the matter goes to the Commission. So we'd always strongly encourage our clients to not simply rely on something like that when wanting to reject a flexible work arrangement request, because at the end of the day, it's going to be tested. It's not a good look if you end up at the Commission, you're making these assertions, but you've simply got no evidence to back it up. The employee is going to have a very negative attitude towards the employer, because they're going to say to them, look, I put this request in, you said no, you relied on this particular ground, and now the Commission has pointed out to you that you've got no evidence in support of that. And
it's just generic.
Yeah, that's right. And the employee feels hard done by, the employer ends up with a bit of egg on their face, and at the end of the day, they're going to have an unfavourable order made. The employee gets their flexible work arrangements, but basically has a poor opinion of their employer from there on in. And also, as we've seen quite a few times, going back to this exercise of a workplace right, the problem is that you may have an employee goes through this process, is ultimately successful, the Commission arbitrates that the flexible work arrangement does need to be put in place, they go on it, their attitude towards the employer is obviously soured, they're not really performing all that well. They've also got then this absolute sort of shield of they've exercised a workplace right, and any remedial action or disciplinary action the employer takes runs the risk of being seen through the prism of adverse action. The employee says, oh, well, the only reason you're doing this is because I took you to the Commission and I won.
And I know you weren't happy, because
and I know you weren't happy,
the employer wouldn't be happy if it was something that they refused.
Because I won and you lost.
Yeah.
And now I think you're just punishing me for that. So again, the employer has got a new challenge, which is facing this adverse action risk because of the exercise of a workplace right in dealing with what may be a genuine performance or sort of attitude shortfall. But that's a whole new challenge, because all of a sudden you've got this sort of Damocles hanging over your head, which is the person has exercised a workplace right in a really visible way and will be undoubtedly perceiving any detriment that they experience as an employee at the hands of the employer. They will sheet it all back to what happened in the Commission when they challenged the refusal of their request for flexible work arrangements. So, and I say this all the time, great for lawyers, but just not good for employers, and really not good for employees either, because the whole thing has soured and you end up in a situation where no one's going to end up happy.
No.
So basically, get it right the first time. When the flexible work arrangement request comes in, deal with it in a sensible, reasonable and appropriate manner as an employer, and you have a far greater chance of not ending up in this scenario that we've just sort of talked through there.
Yep. Communication is It really, and the right communication.
The right communication, not like, nah.
Yeah, because arguably that's communicating.
Yeah, it is communicating, but it's just not the right communications.
Okay, so we've talked about what the framework is, and I will just make one last point before we get back to our matter at hand, our case study, around the considering the consequences to the employee of saying no to or refusing the flexible working request. There was a full bench decision on it recently, so the full bench of the Fair Work Commission looked at this, and what they found that it can't just be a standard, oh yeah, we understand that it will be a bit hard for you if we say no, but we're going to still concentrate on our
business grounds.
Grounds. It's more about you really need to engage with the employee on that piece, with the conversation, and look at the whole gamut. So holistically look at all the ways it could potentially have a consequence to the employee.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, that's a pretty big thing to push on an employer.
Well, because it can be quite intrusive.
Yes.
I mean, you're really having to sort of reach into someone's life in a way that they may not want you to as well. So that in itself is going to present a practical challenge for an employer, because the employee might be reasonably guarded about their own personal circumstances, and rightly so.
Yes, rightly so. But that's a very careful conversation that you need to have. So it's just, again, it just goes back to this is onerous. And particularly if you are a small business and you're the jack of all trades, and you wear the HR hat as well as the operations hat and this hat and that hat, that's hard to do. That is hard to do. And seeking legal advice, while we always recommend that you seek legal advice.
Of course we do.
Of course we do. But, dealing with something like this, it might not be a potential, particularly for a small business owner, it won't be the first thing that they think of, because that's also an extra cost that when things are tough, a few $1,000s up front, it's just hard. It's hard for employers.
Yeah. So to sort of bring this to a conclusion in the current circumstances, so the employer, if they don't want to accept the 3-day request, they could go back and say, we're happy to do 2 days a week from home. We're happy to give you, even if it's a compromise, until you get some appropriate childcare arrangements in place. We're happy to do 3 for the next month or so. And then after that, our preference would be to go down to 2 days a week from home, 3 days from the office. These are the reasons. And, we've got those business grounds that the Act has suggested, and there might be others that you could bring in. We need you face to face with the other staff. The team's underperforming. We've already raised this with you previously, but we think that this would work. Those days at your home, we would like you to have sort of, toolbox meeting effectively, to use sort of more of a blue collar sort of term, with your team on those 2 days, just so we are making sure that there is that level of engagement that we require as an organisation to get that team performing up to the level that we need. And you can go from there, because at least that conversation started, and then the employee might come back and sort of say, look, that doesn't work because of A, B and C, but at least you are starting to meet those requirements in the Act. And the factors like having to get the team performing, the fact that you might have already raised the issue of team underperformance with the team and with the manager previously, does give a bit of context to say, look, we actually have these operational considerations that are genuine. Mm-hmm. And at least then, and I know you say this in particular, but communication and dialogue is really important. And going back there in good faith and making some suggestions that might not be exactly what the employee wants, but at least show that you are engaging with their concerns and trying to manage them in the context of your own operational needs is a really good start. So in this situation, you might go back and, there might be a little bit of toing and froing. And also, the only thing that I would really say about this as well, we talked about timeframes. Do not lock yourself into an open-ended situation unless, to be a little bit cynical, it sort of suits you. There have been certain circumstances where employees feel that an employee working full-time is being underutilised. They put in a flexible work request and quietly the employer thinks, woohoo, because they move them back to, say, 4 days a week, lock it in with a new contract, and then the employee is kind of locked in without, perhaps they're not thinking about it, but they are locked into those lower work hours on an ongoing basis, because there's no sort of sunset clause on it. But in the alternative, if it doesn't suit you as an employer, and we act for employers, if it doesn't suit you as an employer, then having some sort of time frame or a period of review at least locked into the arrangement in writing, is going to be really important, because you don't necessarily want to have this situation ongoing after the factors in the employee's life that have necessitated it have changed. So I think that that's really important, not only to follow the process, but to make sure that you do have quite defined parameters set in writing around those flexible work arrangements, including in terms of the duration and also potential for a review.
And we've seen it firsthand where something was agreed on, and it was agreed on for 6 months, 1 year, but the
3 years later,
the written material never said it. And then exactly 3 years later, it's, oh, well, this doesn't suit us as a business anymore, and we'd like to revert them back. That's always very problematic, because where's that temporary variation to their terms and conditions?
It's just a variation.
It's just a variation.
Yeah. So it is tricky. Well, there you go. Not exactly in a nutshell, but request for flexible work arrangements, a bit of a minefield, like so many other areas in employment law, but one that, again, we can't reiterate this strongly enough, that if you follow the appropriate process, it's going to get you at least 50% of the way to where you need to be. And it needs to be well documented. It needs to be undertaken reasonably, because every time we talk about these sort of things, you've still got all the work cover risks for mental health issues, that if there is some conflict over these sort of things, it can go down that path. So having the appropriate process and communicating in a sensible way, and
in a written way too, because we really want to put all those
face to face, but also confirming meetings in writing. It doesn't all need to be in writing. I mean, the formal response in this situation ultimately does, but having a meeting and then just saying, oh, look, here, just to summarise our meeting today, I'm just going to send you just a quick email just to confirm it. But those sort of things are really important. So sort of process. And for employers, you've got to be reasonable, but also sometimes you've got to stand your ground, because there will be times where what the employee wants and what the business really needs, genuinely needs, are not going to be the same thing at all, and you are going to have to work out a way forward. So thank you, Ines, and look forward to the next scenario, whatever that may be.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for joining us on We Have This Employee. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your colleagues. You can find this podcast and all episodes in the series on our website, www.cielegal.com.au, on LinkedIn, and all the usual podcast hosting platforms. Until next time, thanks for listening.